righty, we are here with Alan. Is it Kraft? Is that how you pronounce? No, I'm just kidding. Alan Kraft and Jim Kabakow, co-founders, managing partners of Bin 113, one of the coolest and winiest companies you'll ever come across. Which we'll get to plenty of that, but also the brains behind Media Horizons, an amazing career there. We'll touch on all these things. And Alan, now you guys are clients of Max Podcasting as well, so this has become really, really, really meta. But Alan, Jim, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and doing this. And you're probably going to regret the next 40 minutes. Thank you. How are you guys doing today?
A little intimidated by that last comment.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on. We really do appreciate it, and we're looking forward to chatting with you. And telling you
back at you. Well, I the reason I said you should be scared is because this first segment we do is all financial information. So we're gonna go one by one. We're gonna talk your social security numbers. We're gonna talk your credit card numbers, and then I got to hop off actually. So no, I'm just kidding.
I'll make it very easy for you. My social security number is 1.
Perfect.
And all my credit cards have been revoked for non-payment.
Awesome. What is a credit card anyway? So before we get to Media Horizons, we got to start off hot. Wine. Why? And this is going to sound accusatory, but I'm just fascinated. Why are you guys so obsessed with wine?
Well, I think obsessed is a little bit strong, but we are definitely passionate about it and enthusiastic about it. And because it encompasses so many different elements. It's growing the grapes and farming, it's the process of winemaking, and then it's the enjoyment of drinking the finished product, which has so many variables, and people are passionate about it and have their own opinions about what they like and what they don't. It's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, I think what Jim said is accurate in the sense that my take is most people who drink a glass of wine give zero thought whatsoever to what it took to put that wine into that glass. We've gotten to know a number of farmers who basically have chosen their primary crop to be grapes, and it's really interesting because I don't think about the farmer who grows the lettuce that's in my salad at dinner any more than before we got into this. I never really gave any thought to the farmer who was growing the grapes or to the winemaker who was, doing their magic to make what I was drinking so delicious. So there's such depth to this business. I think we're so much still in a learning process. It's really fun to learn new things.
I think also to what Alan's saying, I think that world is changing. People are thinking more about farm to table and eating locally, but they haven't gotten yet there to drinking locally. And one of the things we're doing is we're working with a lot of winemakers and wineries throughout the U.S., not just, the big four of, California, Oregon, Washington, and New York State, but really throughout the country. And what we found is, there are 12,000 wineries in the U.S. and there are exceptions, but for the most, they spend a lot of time, energy, resources growing grapes. The same with making wine, but not so much about marketing it and selling it. And that's really our background and what we really bring, kind of the third leg of that stool to the wineries that we're working with.
By the way, Alan, you may not think about the farmer who grows your lettuce, but I spend a lot of time thinking about the farmer who grows your lettuce. So I'm glad we flagged that there.
I mean, you're so giving and kind, Mac.
So let's put a pin, or let's put a bin in 113 for now. A little foreshadowing for later. So let's get to Media Horizons, and we have to go back just a couple years for this, from the early days. And if you look at the history of your company, it's pretty much like you guys you've lived and are living the American dream, like starting an agency, like doing what you love, building it, growing it, and then selling it, and then even after that, being able to pivot into another area that you love is really cool. So I want to go back to like the very very early start. Where did the idea to start your own agency come from?
So I worked for three other agencies, direct marketing, or in today's parlance, direct to consumer marketing agencies, starting in the mid 70s through the 80s. And, I had always hoped that I'd have the opportunity to start my own agency. I was very, very fortunate because, there were two gentlemen, one whose name was Ed Kabakow and the other's name was Lou Pepe, who were willing to take a flyer on me and put up some money and give it a shot. It was early days for me. I was 30 when I started the company. I was really fortunate that Ed, Jim's dad, and I were able to convince Jim when he graduated from school that a glamorous career on Wall Street couldn't hold a candle to sitting in the basement of an old house of mine in Norwalk, Connecticut. And Jim joined very, very shortly thereafter, and so he and I've worked together, really since 1988. It's an amazing run, if you will, and clearly, like any other business, we had our ups and downs, but we had more ups than downs, and we were very, very happy and very, very fortunate, I think, to close on our sale in January of 2020, right before the world sort of took a left turn due to COVID. And then we stayed around for as long as the acquirers wanted us, and we kind of left and decided that retirement was fun, but not necessarily a full time gig. And so we decided that we would get back together again and start this new company, Bin 113.
Jim, what was it about Alan's basement that was, or whatever else was
Yeah.
appealing that actually got
Well,
you to put
well,
off that other career?
so as Alan mentioned, I started my career in finance. I was an economics major in college, and I started at DLJ as an intern, and then afterwards. And as Alan said, so my dad, Lou, some other people were. It wasn't a term that it was used back then, but now you would consider them angel investors. So they were angel investors in the company, and it seemed like an interesting opportunity to do something entrepreneurial. If it didn't work out, Wall Street wasn't going anywhere. So it was a good opportunity to get in on the ground floor, of something at the time. Some I think important things when you think about it is that was really pre-internet, so the marketing landscape was very different once the internet came. But what we did over the time really didn't change much. It was really um, we were working with blue chip clients to cost effectively generate new customers for them, and the techniques changed. But what we kind of did was still pretty much the same for our clients as far as trying to meet their goals. The big thing for me changed in 2007, I guess, when Alan left the company and I became CEO. That was kind of a defining moment, I think, in my career. And I stayed in that role through 2020 when we sold the company to CNG and Lindenmeyer Publication. And then for a few years out, and then we were able to kind of exit and pivot and figure out something else that we wanted to do, staying in that direct to consumer marketing. And I think one other important thing is we had talked to wineries over the years, um, but because they didn't have the marketing infrastructure, their budgets tended to be small. They really never fit into kind of the right type of client for us because, we had a decent, at our largest, we had about 50 people working for it, which is not a huge agency, but, still a decent size framework and
Yeah,
overhead.
we'll give you that's pretty good, not too shabby.
So we really couldn't take them on as clients. And we kind of always had it in the back of our head, like we'd really love to work with these people that we had met over the years and been introduced to and really couldn't. Uh, So that's really kind of the genesis of Bin 113, and with our, new overhead, as you can see in the background, basically, our homes and, definitely different cost structure for an employee. We're really able to do it and make it work for these wineries.
So you start working from home, and then you build it all the way up to working from home. So
Yeah,
come full circle there.
it's interesting, Jim. This is, I think, the first time I ever heard that Wall Street was in the back of your mind as an escape hatch. I didn't know that. I thought you were all in, man.
So when you look at the early days of Media Horizons, what do you think was key in securing your first clients and like turning it into some sort of a real business?
Yeah.
Uh,
So I mean, the answer I would give you is, relationships that existed prior to the start of the company were obviously low hanging fruit. So we started working with the Wall Street Journal early days because they had been a client. We started working with an insurance company called National Liberty early days, and the Franklin Mint early days. They were all relationships, that pre-existed the company. I think the other thing about it is Jim and I are so damn charming, and
I was going to say that. Yeah, I didn't want to spoil it.
clearly, brilliantly, talented in marketing, that people just came to us. They were flocking. If only that were true. It was, as Jim said, it was pre-internet. It was a period of time in which direct-to-consumer marketing was sort of based in direct mail, and print advertising, and something called insert media, and we knew those really well, and we were able to parlay some early successes into acquiring some other customers along the way, and forced ourselves out of the basement into hiring new people and building a staff over time. So that's how I kind of look back on those days, somewhat rose-colored glasses, I think. But I think, to me, the most interesting thing is we were so sort of behind the times technologically. We had an IBM Selectric typewriter that was like third hand, and it was missing a capital H, which was kind of tough when your second name of your company is Horizons. And so we figured out a way to do it. We just muddled through and learned from our mistakes, and just kept going.
so, I think, as Alan talked to, the channel we really started out in was an area called alternative media, which was inserts and ride-alongs and blow-ins and mass media. And the companies that were doing that at the time, while it's kind of a billion-dollar media channel, the companies that were doing it at the time were these little family-owned businesses. They weren't looking at growth or really trying to do something, taking the agency model of analytics and creative and doing the things that some of the bigger agencies were doing in this channel. And I have to credit Alan. It was really his vision to create a real agency in this channel, that really didn't exist. And from there, we were able to expand. We had a good story to tell. We were able to tell it to, bigger clients and bring on some of the more corporate clients that had some of the larger budgets. And then those relationships, I think because we built some trust there, they asked us to, if they're saying, you guys are doing this alternative media, do you guys buy on page print? And we were basically entrepreneurial enough that if a client asked us to get into a different area for them, we went and figured out how to do it. We never said, no, we don't do that. It was more about, maybe we don't right now, but we're going to figure out how to do it so we can add those services on to what we were doing currently.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. I think that's a great way to grow is like when you can add so many services like that. But obviously, like it's way easier said than done. How in the world did you educate yourselves and educate your team about? All right, we're gonna get into email marketing. We're gonna get into digital marketing. Like there's social media now. Like how do you become a
Well,
expert in new things?
I think one of the things we did best was we hired good people and let them do their thing. So we hired someone who had been the former media director of Gray Advertising, who got us into print. And then Oric Vacuum Cleaners became one of our largest clients, buying all of their print. We hired good people to do direct mail, eventually analytics, creative. And that's really how we got into digital too. We tried to buy a digital agency. We failed at that. So we built it ourselves, and we hired people from that world, um, and kind of, let them uh, help us in those areas, and build out those skill sets and those capabilities. Um, and I think, that was really the approach we took, and how we expanded into those other channels.
And if you were to look back at like the crazy growth and exit journey there, we'll call it, besides relationships and then having good people and just like staying out of their business in a way, uh, what else would you say like was most valuable in growing the business over the years?
Having fun,
Having fun.
having fun. You know, really,
I'm laughing, Jim, because the way you first said that didn't sound that exciting, but the way but fun is exciting. Like, having fun. Yeah, no, just kidding.
Well, I
you
think
know,
we created an atmosphere for the people that worked for us and for our clients in which they wanted to work for us and they wanted to be our clients. I mean, we were, I think, maybe ahead of our time in terms of not taking ourselves too seriously. I think that we
As
really
much as obvious.
we really went out of our way to spend as much time physically as much time as we could with our clients. Keep in mind there were no Zoom calls, back then. There were, barely cell phones, back then. But we always believed in those sort of in-person meetings, experiences, always accompanied by a good meal, generally accompanied by a good bottle of wine. And I think it was our ability to sort of make people comfortable with us, to also make sure that the people who are actually doing the day-to-day work on their accounts were not, in the background in those meetings, but they were taking the lead in those meetings, because at the end of the day, they knew that Jim and I weren't necessarily doing all the work, and these other folks were, so they needed to get comfortable with them, and we did. I think for many years, host and sort of encourage a fun atmosphere with a lot of fun events and happenings, and I think it made a big difference.
And last thing before we get to the wine moments we've all been waiting for. What advice do you either I actually want to hear the first thing that comes to both your minds, but what advice do you have for any founder who aspires to sell their business one day?
well, so I think what's interesting is, and you know, our business, I don't think we ever really thought necessarily at the time we were going to sell it. It wasn't until we started getting some offers from other bigger companies that we really started thinking about it and saying, huh, maybe this is something we need to, um, get our business really in good shape if this is something we want to do these days. And what we started seeing, particularly as a lot of investment, startup capital, and angel investing, you started having companies that were thinking about their exit before they even made dollar one. And I would say, um, really focus on the business, what's gonna build it, what's gonna make it, um, you know, grow and flourish, versus do I have an idea that I can sell one day? Because if you do those things, those outcomes and those opportunities will happen for you.
Yeah. So my, sort of take on that is your company one that you would want to buy yourself if you were the acquirer rather than the seller? So you look at the sort of the business model. You look at, in the case of any agency, who are the clients? What's the tenure of those relationships? What's the likelihood of the future longevity of those client relationships? So no different than if Jim and I were looking to acquire agencies, what we would look for in those is essentially what we wanted to be able to portray to potential acquirers. Because we were not just an idea; we were a functioning, living and breathing entity that brought value to the company that acquired us.
So speaking of value, let's get to bin 13. Bin Oh Jesus, I'm so sorry. I was doing so good pronouncing your company name right, and here we are. I took 100 off. I took one off. Let's get to bin 1113. No, bin 113. And as you've hinged out and started to detail before, really, really cool company in the wine space, but also helping like the marketing and growth of, I mean, so many amazing independent winemakers that are out there in the US. And I think something that I've learned already from, working on your podcast as part of this company, Wine Across America, that we'll get to, is yeah, I think when most people think about wine in the US, they just think about, two or three regions, but like there's wine in all 50 states and amazing winemakers and vineyards. And you could do I mean, you're kind of doing this with the podcast, but you could do like a road trip to all 50 states and experience great wine everywhere. So I think it's really, really cool what you're doing. But what was it, so like you mentioned before that you realized retirement was not as fun or not as full time yet for you guys as it seemed. What was it about wine from like an industry perspective that you're like, this is, pardon the pun, a little bit untapped from a marketing standpoint?
Free samples. No, I'm kidding.
Well, if that goes without
I
saying,
think
without sipping.
I think it's what you said. I think that there's a lack of knowledge among the wine drinking American public of the fact that there is very good wine being made in places other than the ones Jim listed earlier, led by California, which is by far the 800-pound gorilla in the domestic wine business. I mean, we've been very very fortunate to meet some really interesting people. Their stories are amazing. There's a winery that the owner and the winemaker appear on one of the episodes of Wine Across America. They're from Washington State, from Walla Walla, Washington. It's called Airfield Estates. And the most amazing story is that the facility that they produce wine in and the tasting room where people come to visit and sample their product are all part of what was hastily put up at the beginning of World War II as a fighter pilot training facility. So therefore, Airfield Estate. But literally, it's the hangars that were built in 1942 in which they're operating. And that to me, it's just like a fascinating story. And there's a million of them. I've had the pleasure of meeting the owner of a winery that is literally adjacent to a Civil War battlefield in Virginia. It's called the Winery at Bull Run. And in the basement of the winery and beneath the tasting room, he's got a private Civil War museum. And he's got over 7,500 artifacts in that museum, many of which he personally has picked up off the battlefield itself. I mean, it's just that kind of a business. For every state there's a story. For every region there's a story. For every winery there's a story. We have a client in New Jersey, Jim is really close with, that their primary crop used to be Asian-inspired vegetables that they sold to a wholesaler who supplied 90% of the restaurants in Chinatown and Manhattan. And now they're producing, wine grapes. So to me, it's just a fascinating business.
It's energizing and tasty just hearing about it. how about you,
Well,
Jim, from like a fascination
yeah, I mean,
standpoint? Like,
I love the wine business. I've taken some, I got one of the things I did as part of this was I got educated and really learned a little bit about wine. There's a company called Wine and Spirit Educational Trust that is like, for sommeliers. So I took, you know, level 1 and level 2 of WSET Educational Trust so level 2 som with merit, and also took a course from
You
eCornell.
just knocked Alan's socks off.
I didn't, I didn't graduate college with honors, so I might as well say that I graduated wine. And also from eCornell on American wineries, and it's just a fascinating process. What I'll also say is I think this is a little bit of a generalization, but I'm going to go with it anyway. What we tend to find is the wineries that are owned in the U.S. Forget about the big holding companies that own 100 brands like Constellation. Most of the independent wineries fall into two categories. It's usually someone who's made a lot of money in something else that loves wine and decides they want to own a winery. And it's also someone like Alan mentioned, our client in New Jersey, who's a fourth generation farmer, and decided 25 years ago they didn't want to do vegetable farming anymore. They wanted to do a winery. And they're both very interesting, very capable, smart people, know the businesses inside and out, but also have a different mindset kind of when it comes to marketing. And it's really working kind of with their backgrounds and what their goals and objectives are to bring the direct consumer side into the wine business.
So I just got to interrupt for 1 second and say that Jim and I are having dinner together this evening, and
Congratulations.
we're going to put the level 2 WSET with honors to a test because clearly, whenever we have dinner together, I haven't seen a wine list in years. It's it's Jim's.
Here's my pin. I didn't wear my pin, but I probably should have worn my pin.
I was gonna say you looked a little pinless.
Yeah,
you're gonna rock that thing tonight. I mean, I think
actually it's a new vest. I don't think I want.
Is it a full graduation ceremony, like cap and gown, diploma?
You know what the crazy thing is? I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's like,
no, we can please the rest of the time.
They still, in this day and age of technology, it still takes 3 months to get the test results because they're based in England. They have to send the test to England, and then you find out by email and get something in the mail with your PIN and your certificate. So they're a little antiquated. I will say though that we are also having dinner. It's not just us; it's two of our former partners at Media Horizons that we're dining with. So we've still stayed, even though we're not all involved in Media Horizons together. We're still, we've still stayed close as a group. And,
so I double dog dare you to wear that pin to dinner tonight.
It's happening now.
Please report back on that. Yeah, we might need a selfie, a pin selfie.
Yeah, there'll be photos, Max, for sure. There'll definitely be photos early in.
And for anybody listening, the pin is about 6 inches by 6 inches. It's massive. No, I'm just kidding. It's like it's not, but it's very cool badge of honor, pin of honor. But with bin 113, so what's looking ahead and with your early clients, what's like the greatest, the main insight or value that you want to help unlock for your clients?
For me, I think before we answer that sort of tactically, I just want to share with you a conversation that Jim and I have had numerous times over the last few months, which is the people that we're dealing with. As Jim said earlier, they're investing in the agricultural aspects of the wine business. They're investing in the winemaking process itself. They're investing in their wineries and their tasting rooms. They typically have not invested in their marketing at all or known how they should go about investing in their marketing. That's really the role that we're filling for them. But we've gotten off a number of client calls and instantly call each other and say, I like those people so much. I so badly want to help them with what they're doing. And I'm not going to say we didn't feel that way about our clients at Media Horizons, but the difference is we worked with a lot of very large corporations with large marketing teams who were employees of those, in some cases private, in some cases publicly traded companies, and it was different. Here you're dealing with the owners. Jim said fourth generation farmer, just really, really good people and nice people. And for me, there's just much more of a personal stake that I feel in our ability to help them succeed. So that's sort of my answer to your question. Jim, you can probably share a little bit more of the actual tactical piece of it.
And now Jim is wearing 2 pins.
Look, I think it comes down to you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of these wineries are, they're doing some marketing and some social media, but they haven't been trained in it. They don't have really the background in it, so there's a lot of skills expertise. And we should mention too, we do have a third partner out on the West Coast, a guy named Jeff Giordano, who also we've known forever, been in the marketing business, now lives out in Montecito area, grows some grapes on his estate out there, and has introduced us to some people. So between us, we've got 100 years, let's say 100 years plus of direct consumer marketing experience. It's kind of hard to replicate, and it would be like me saying, okay, now that I've taken a few wine courses, I can go and make wine. But I can't do that. I don't know what I don't know. And I think until you do it, you don't kind of realize those things. So I think that's really what we're trying to do is simplify the process and just bring all this experience that we have, and expertise in an efficient way into their businesses so they can sell more wine cost effectively, so they can generate more wine club members, so they can get more people to the events at their locations, where in turn they can uh, you know sell more wine too. So for us, it's really evolutionary versus revolutionary. We're working with what they have and gradually kind of bringing change and getting them, into really a process where they can be efficient and they don't have to spend as much time as they are spending on this, because most of the clients they're working with, they don't have full-time marketing people. So, that's really a role that we can play.
And one of the ways, and this just by coincidence happens to be my favorite way that you're marketing the business and adding some personality to the business, is with a brand new, hot off the press at the time this is released, podcast called Wine Across America. Super, super cool podcast. One of the most fun I've ever had working on a podcast. You're doing audio, you're doing video, and you're talking to the amazing people behind these amazing wineries, and you're going state by state. So I don't want to reveal too much, but it's hot off the press. But Alan, you and another one of your team, Sandra, are co-hosting it, and you're naturals, I have to say. I'm just totally buttering you up now, but what are you most excited to share on Wine Across America?
So before I answer that question, I got to give Jim a little bit of an update, because our friend Sandra, who's co-hosting this with me, she's about to get her level 2 from WSET. Jim,
That's
so
great.
yeah. So now you got to go for level 3. You can't.
I'm thinking about it. Well, considering she teaches a college course in wine, I think that's, I'm glad she's now finally ended up to my level.
By the law of syllogism, you could also teach a college course then.
Yeah, I think that the podcast is fun for us in that, like you said, we're interviewing really, really interesting people with very varied backgrounds. We've got, 4 episodes under our belts at this point. We've got another few in the queue for January that we'll put together. I think the fun for me is not just the fact that we get to taste the wines of each of these people, but we do. So that's kind of neat. But we get to hear them not just tell the story of their own personal wine journeys, not just tell the story of their wineries, history of their region, of their climate, of the challenges that they face. I mean, let's face it, the wineries are all facing some significant challenges these days, but they're they're just really, they're in a business that essentially is providing people with a product that they love, and I think they love doing it. So it kind of comes across. I mean, that first one we did with the guys from Virginia, Sandra and I literally opened the podcast by saying, "Hi, how are you?" And then they talked for 45 minutes. We didn't have to say a word.
See, is it being a host so easy?
It's amazing. So even you seemingly can do it.
Even me. Well, I only have my level 1 certification, but one day I'll be able
Yeah.
to.
And when
But
we have absolutely no idea how the podcast will be received by listeners. We're going to promote it pretty aggressively, and the wineries themselves are going to promote it because I think they're excited about having appeared on these episodes, and we'll see. Is this something that is going to threaten Hoda Kotb for listenership, long term? Probably not. But if we can get some listeners and viewers and people who enjoy it and leave positive reviews, and then that's sort of a nice add on to our business, and it also gives our clients an opportunity to evangelize their businesses and tell listeners where they can purchase their products. So it's a positive from that perspective as well.
yeah. I'll just say that if you look like on YouTube and check out the first few episodes, I think you'll see pretty quickly like this is pretty different than a typical podcast interview. Like in that first episode you mentioned, Alan, it was so fun going through it and putting it together because it's not like the typical interview like we're doing now, just like remotely and everybody's kind of seated in their home. You're talking to the people behind these wineries like at the vineyards, and they even might be like walking around and showing you different, showing you like the casks and the grapes and like their like a balcony with a beautiful view of the vineyards, things like that. And so it's super visually engaging as well. So super excited that it's great in both audio and video form. And before I I already have talked more than you and Sandra talked on that first episode, but before I talk even more too much, let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
We are. I'm hoping that somewhere in this Q&A, I get to tell my favorite Jim wine story.
Well,
I'm a little scared now.
Don't
so
be. You're going to remember this one very clearly.
All right, let's get wild. So what is your second favorite now? What all right, Alan, what is your favorite wine story of Jim?
So Jim and I were at a conference in San Francisco many years ago, and we chose to spend an extra night in San Francisco, a city that we've always loved. When the rest of our team employees and clients went home, and we decided we'd go out for a very nice dinner at a lovely steakhouse in the Union Square area of San Francisco. And we walked in, and we had a cocktail at the bar, and we sat down, and Jim asked the waiter to bring the wine list, and he got the wine list, and the wine list was a book about yay thick, and I'm watching him go through it, and I'm like interested in the expression on his face is turning increasingly sour with every page that's turned, and I said to him, like, what's going on? You don't seem too happy. He goes, this is the most ridiculous wine list I've ever seen. And if I remember correctly, and Jim, this has got to be 15 or 20 years ago. I don't think there was a bottle of wine on the list below $150 or $200, which back then was like a high price. And he literally goes, I can't take another minute of this. And he kind of slams the book shut, and the sommelier comes over, and they got into it pretty good. And Jim sort of stood his ground that the markups on some of those wines were extraordinarily unfair. And we ended up getting a wonderful bottle of wine. I can't remember what it was offhand, but we didn't pay anywhere close to the price that was listed in the in the wine list itself. So kudos to you, Jim. You saved us a few bucks back then, but it was when I knew that Jim knew 1,000 times more about wine than I ever did or would. But that's my favorite Jim wine story.
The better memory I have at that restaurant was when with our client from Aurek, and Phil Sims and Armin Contain were in the same restaurant a few tables away.
Right.
And we saw them, and we were dying to talk to them, and we were, not going over. And she walked right over and brought Phil and Armin over to our table and chatted with them. And they were the nicest guys. And they were there to call, I guess, a Monday night football game while we were there.
That's
So,
right. I forgot about that. And, Armin lives a couple of blocks from here. He lives in the
yeah.
neighborhood. Yeah, yeah. See him out all the time. So
All right. So let's go, Max. Let's hear your rapid fire.
That was it. Speaking of sports, Jim, I saw you play baseball at Tufts.
Yeah.
What position were you?
Well, I was a shortstop all through growing up from like 8 to 18 through high school. So I really think of mine then, but I didn't have the range or the arm to play shortstop in college, so I moved to the outfield.
And how would you characterize the difference between the competition level playing in high school versus playing in college?
I just looked at this for football. There are like 15,000 high schools that have teams and 700 colleges. So only about 5% go on at any level. And yeah, I mean, the D1 guys are just, off the charts. But it's, everyone you play against, every pitcher you pitch against was probably the ace on their team. I think what was also a bigger challenge was the size of the fields in college or pro level. I knew I was in trouble at the college level when I hit a ball basically as far as I could, which would have been out of my high school field by a long shot, and it was flagged down on the warning track. And I'm like, oh boy,
Uh-huh.
I'm in trouble. But it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing
That was like
college.
me, except when I hit it as far as I could, it was like, oh, it got to the back of the infield.
can I add that Jim was consistently the most valuable player on our Media Horizon softball team?
I was gonna guess that.
At,
Yeah,
at,
there's some
at shortstop, he got his legs back.
That's right.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you can you can dominate in those company softball leagues like that. And also on sports, Alan. So I've heard this fun fact when you spoke with our mutual friend Mark Freeman, who on his shout out the marketing playbook, who actually introduced us in the first place. You've been to 9 Super Bowls,
Yep.
which is at least 9 more than I've been to. But which one of those was like the craziest game to see in person?
Oh gosh. Well, I think for me, the first one was the craziest because it was a new experience to me. I'll say this much. I've been to 3 in New Orleans. To me, New Orleans should be the permanent home of the Super Bowl. It's the only city in which you can walk to the stadium from every hotel, restaurant, and bar. So it's just a great place, and it's a city that's really meant to or built for being able to handle big groups, big crowds like that. I have some great memories, some great football. I think the first one was New England and Green Bay, and somewhere in this house is still a cheese hat that I wore because I'm not a big fan of New England, so I was rooting for Green Bay that day. But that was an amazing ride. Getting to see all those games in person. I was also at the game in New Orleans with the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction, and we were like, "What? Did we just see that?" It's kind of a crazy.
Well, I still remember. I mean, like I was pretty young when that happened, but I still remember that at least back then they kept replaying it over and over again on the news, and like uncensored and everything. I'm like, why are they still showing that?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
So,
All right, and then last one. What is your outside the U.S. real quick, both of you? If you could be dropped and spend a long weekend in any wine region in the world, what would it be?
well, for me, I actually just had the opportunity. I spent 3 days in Burgundy, and Burgundy is the birthplace of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and um, we spent a couple nights in kind of the capital of Burgundy area, which is this little city of Beaune, this medieval city, and it was fabulous just seeing these, century-old iconic vineyards, and just tasting, Premier Cru and Grand Cru wines from Burgundy was just, as a wine person, that was really kind of mecca for me.
So for me, it's anywhere in Italy. We just got back from a couple of weeks in Emilia Romagna, which is a region with the largest city is Bologna. But in the Veneto, which is where Venice is located, they've got that's where they make Amarone wines, which have become my favorite Italian. Jim, note please for tonight's wine list, Amarone would be high on my wish list. Second to that, anywhere in Italy would be the area around Jerez in Spain, which is the sherry capital of the world. And it's not because I love sherry all that much. It's just one of the most beautiful areas I've ever been in my life, and I'd love to get back there at some point.
Awesome. Well, dream places. Thank you guys so much. This has been an absolute blast, and so over the moon excited to partner. Love Wine Across America. Listeners, viewers, make sure to check it out on your favorite podcast platform. You can also check out bin113.com. And then for both of you, is LinkedIn the best place probably to connect online?
Yep.
Perfect.
100%.
And then last thing, final thoughts. Literally, it could be a one line, a haiku, whatever you want. Either one of you shout it out. What's just kind of words to live by to send us home here?
Love what you do.
Bring on the bongos.